What would you do if the person you trusted most betrayed you in the cruelest way possible? Betrayal doesn't always come with loud fights or dramatic revelations. Sometimes, it's in the quiet erosion of trust, the subtle digs, and the public humiliation that leave wounds no one else can see. Meet Ethan, a devoted husband and father who once believed his wife, Sophia, was his greatest ally. They had a seemingly perfect life, a cozy home, 2 beautiful kids, and a partnership that others envied. But behind closed doors, their marriage was crumbling under the weight of Sophia's sharp words and biting sarcasm. Ethan had always brushed off her comments, chalking them up to stress or bad days, but he couldn't ignore the growing feeling that something darker was at play. It wasn't just the snide remarks or the way she'd mock him in private. No, Sophia loved an audience, and she saved her sharpest barbs for when their friends and family were present. She thrived on turning Ethan into the butt of her jokes, belittling him with a smile as if it were all harmless fun. But Ethan knew better. The breaking point came at a dinner party, where Sophia crossed a line Ethan never thought she would. That night, humiliation turned into anger, and anger into suspicion. As Ethan began unraveling the truth about Sophia's double life, he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not this time. What Ethan uncovered next would change everything. But how do you confront betrayal? How do you get even with the person who tore your life apart? Stick around to find out. Ethan could still remember when the first cracks in their marriage began to show. At first, Sophia's insults were minor, little comments about his cooking or how he folded the laundry. "Wow, Ethan, how do you even manage to mess up boiling water?" She'd tease with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. He'd laugh it off, hoping it was harmless. But over time, her remarks grew sharper, more deliberate. She seemed to relish putting him down in front of others. At one family gathering, she loudly joked about how Ethan had taken on the role of a house husband after Sophia's promotion. "I mean, he's amazing at folding diapers. I just wish he had that same ambition for, real life," she said with a smirk, raising her wine glass as her audience chuckled nervously. Ethan felt the sting of her words but stayed quiet, unwilling to create a scene. But it wasn't just her words, it was the way she said them. Her tone dripped with disdain, and her eyes sparkled with satisfaction whenever she landed a particularly cruel jab. And every time, Ethan swallowed his pride and pretended it didn't hurt. He told himself it was for the kids, for the family, for the peace of their home. The dinner party that finally broke Ethan's silence was supposed to be a casual evening with close friends. The group had known each other for years, and Ethan had hoped it would be a rare, relaxing night. Instead, it became Sophia's stage. "Let's all toast to Ethan," Sophia declared, raising her glass with a grin that made Ethan's stomach churn. "The king of laundry folding and bottle warming. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without him. Except maybe live with a man who actually has ambition." The laughter that followed was louder this time, less nervous. Even Ethan's closest friends seemed unsure of how to react. Ethan clenched his fists under the table, his jaw tightening as he tried to steady his breathing. "Sophia," he said quietly, his voice laced with warning. But she wasn't finished. "Oh, come on, Ethan," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You're not exactly out there conquering the world. You gave up on your dreams ages ago. But hey, someone's got to play babysitter, right?" The room fell silent as Ethan stood abruptly, the scrape of his chair cutting through the awkward laughter. His heart pounded as he locked eyes with Sophia, her smug expression faltering for the first time. "Enough," he said, his voice cold and steady. "You've made your point. But let me remind you of something, Sophia. When you got pregnant, you were the one begging me to stay home. You said this family needed me. You told me you couldn't bear to give up your career. And like a fool, I believed you." Sophia's smirk disappeared as the room grew tense. Ethan turned to their friends, his voice unwavering. "I sacrificed everything for her. For us. And this is how she repays me. With insults and humiliation. Well, I'm done." Without waiting for a response, Ethan grabbed his coat and left, leaving Sophia and their stunned friends behind. As he walked into the night, his mind raced. Something wasn't adding up. The cruelty wasn't just casual. It felt deliberate, as if Sophia wanted to push him away. Ethan didn't know it yet, but this dinner party was the start of his journey to uncovering the truth. And once he found it, he'd make sure Sophia paid for every single word. The night after the disastrous dinner party, Ethan lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sophia's words replayed in his head, each one cutting deeper than the last. He thought about her smirk, the cruel satisfaction she seemed to get from belittling him, and something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, Ethan stopped brushing off the insults. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The next morning, while Sophia was busy with her usual rushed routine, Ethan started noticing things he had overlooked before. Her wardrobe had gradually become more expensive and stylish, a far cry from the practical outfits she used to favor. She was wearing perfume daily, something she only used to do on special occasions. And then there was her phone, which she kept glued to her side, always locking it the moment he was near. Ethan tried to dismiss his suspicions. After all, they'd been married for years. They had 2 kids. Sophia wouldn't betray him, would she? But the nagging doubt only grew stronger. By the time Sophia left for work, tossing a casual, "Don't wait up," over her shoulder, Ethan decided he needed answers. While tidying up their bedroom that afternoon, Ethan noticed something unusual in Sophia's closet. Pushed to the back of a high shelf was a sleek black gift box tied with a ribbon. Curiosity gnawed at him. Sophia rarely hid things, and certainly not in such an obvious place. Heart pounding, he pulled the box down and untied the ribbon. Inside was a gleaming wristwatch. It was elegant, expensive, and undeniably masculine, the kind of gift Sophia had never bought for him. But what caught Ethan's attention wasn't the watch itself. Tucked beneath it was a small note, written in Sophia's distinctive handwriting. "To the man who makes my heart race, Victor. With all my love, Sophia." Ethan's chest tightened as he read the words. He felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. Victor? Who was Victor? He searched his memory, trying to recall if Sophia had ever mentioned the name, but nothing came to mind. This wasn't just a case of Sophia being cruel or disrespectful. This was betrayal. Ethan's hands trembled as he placed the note and watched back into the box and returned it to its hiding spot. He needed more proof, something concrete and undeniable. If he confronted her now, she'd twist the story, make him look paranoid or delusional. He needed evidence that Sophia couldn't refute. The next day, Ethan ordered a GPS tracker online. He wasn't proud of it, but desperate times called for desperate measures. A week later, the device arrived, and Ethan carefully installed it under Sophia's car bumper early one morning while she was upstairs getting ready for work. The thought of spying on his wife made him feel sick, but he needed to know the truth. For days, Ethan watched Sophia's movements through the GPS app on his phone. At first, everything seemed normal. Work, errands, school pickups. But then he noticed discrepancies. Some evenings, Sophia's car lingered in places she had no reason to be. Restaurants, parking lots, and once, outside a luxury hotel. She never mentioned these stops when she came home. If Ethan hadn't been tracking her, he wouldn't have known. One Friday morning, Sophia left the house earlier than usual, dressed in a sleek black dress and heels that Ethan hadn't seen before. Her makeup was flawless, and she smelled like she just walked out of a high-end perfume store. "Big day at work?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Sophia didn't even look at him. "Don't wait up," she said coolly before grabbing her bag and walking out the door. Ethan's heart pounded as he opened the GPS app on his phone. He watched as the little red dot that marked Sophia's location began to move across the city. Around lunchtime, she stopped in a district filled with upscale restaurants and bars. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. He waited anxiously for Carla, the babysitter, to arrive and take care of the kids. Once she was there, Ethan drove to the address the GPS tracker had provided. An Italian restaurant with dim lighting and a romantic ambience. Sophia's car was parked neatly in the lot, her vanity license plate unmistakable. Ethan sat in his car for a moment, his palms sweaty as he gripped the steering wheel. He debated whether to go in or wait. His mind raced with questions. What would he say? How would Sophia react? Taking a deep breath, Ethan got out of the car and walked toward the restaurant. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of glasses. Ethan scanned the room until his eyes landed on Sophia. She was sitting at a table for two with a man who had to be Victor. Victor was tall, well-dressed, and leaned toward Sophia with an easy confidence. Ethan's stomach churned as he watched them laugh together, their body language far too intimate to be innocent. When Sophia reached into her bag and handed Victor a familiar black box, Ethan froze. Victor opened the box, grinned, and leaned in to kiss Sophia. Ethan's blood boiled. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking as he snapped several photos of the scene. The betrayal was no longer just a suspicion, it was undeniable. Sophia wasn't just humiliating him. She was living a double life. As Ethan walked back to his car, his mind raced. Anger, heartbreak, and determination warred within him. He wasn't just going to confront Sophia. He was going to make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. Ethan had spent years sacrificing for her, enduring her insults, and holding their family together. Now it was time for her to pay for her betrayal. Ethan wasn't sure how he'd do it yet, but one thing was certain. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Ethan sat in his car outside the upscale Italian restaurant, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He could see Sophia's car parked a few spaces away, her vanity plate gleaming under the dim streetlights. His pulse was racing, and his mind replayed the images of her sitting with Victor, laughing and leaning toward him like a love-struck teenager. The betrayal he'd uncovered was no longer just a suspicion. It was a reality staring him in the face. For a moment, he hesitated. What if confronting her here made him look desperate or unhinged? But then he remembered all the public humiliation, the endless insults, and the sacrifices he'd made for their family. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about reclaiming his dignity. Ethan took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the restaurant. The soft glow of candlelight from inside made the scene even more surreal. As he pushed open the door, the hostess greeted him with a warm smile. "Table for one?" she asked. Ethan forced a polite smile, though his insides churned. "Actually, I'm meeting someone," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing within him. The hostess gestured toward the dining room. "Feel free to look around. Let me know if you need anything." Ethan stepped into the room, scanning the tables until his eyes locked onto Sophia and Victor. They were seated at a small, intimate table in the far corner. Victor was leaning forward, a confident smirk on his face, while Sophia twirled a strand of hair around her finger, a gesture Ethan hadn't seen in years. In that moment, he felt like an outsider in his own life. As Ethan approached their table, his steps deliberate and unhurried, neither Sophia nor Victor noticed him at first. They were too engrossed in their conversation. Ethan stopped a few feet away, his presence casting a shadow over their intimate moment. Sophia was mid-laugh when she looked up and froze. Her smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of shock and horror. "Ethan," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here?" Victor turned to face him, his confident demeanor faltering as he took in Ethan's expression. "Who's this?" Victor asked, glancing nervously between Sophia and Ethan. Ethan pulled out the empty chair at their table and sat down, his movements calm and deliberate. Folding his hands on the table, he met Victor's eyes first. "I'm Ethan," he said, his voice steady. "Sophia's husband." The words hit the table like a sledgehammer. Victor's smirk evaporated, and he leaned back in his chair, visibly uncomfortable. "Husband," he echoed, turning to Sophia. "What the hell is this?" Sophia's face had gone pale, her carefully curated facade crumbling under the weight of Ethan's presence. "Ethan, please," she began, her voice trembling. "Let's not do this here." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Oh, now you want to keep things private? That's funny, considering you've spent the last year making me the punchline of your jokes in front of our friends." Victor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly regretting every choice that had led him to this moment. "Look, man," he said, raising his hands defensively. "I didn't know." "Shut up," Ethan cut him off, his voice low and dangerous. This isn't about you. Sit there and squirm if you want, but don't say another word. Victor snapped his mouth shut, glancing nervously at Sophia, who looked like she wanted to disappear. Ethan turned his attention back to her, his gaze piercing. Go on, Sophia. Tell me how long this has been going on. Tell me why you thought I wouldn't find out. Sophia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, her silence speaking volumes. Ethan leaned forward, his voice cold. You've spent months tearing me down, making me feel like I was nothing. And all the while, you've been sneaking around with him. He gestured toward Victor, who was avoiding eye contact. Was it fun, Sophia? Did it make you feel powerful? Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes, but Ethan didn't stop. I gave up everything for you. My career, my dreams, my dignity. All so you could have the life you wanted. And this is how you repay me. Sophia finally found her voice, though it was shaky. Ethan, it's not what you think, she said, her words tumbling over each other. Victor is just a friend. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, leaning back in his chair. A friend? That's the story you're going with? Just a casual dinner with a friend, exchanging expensive gifts and holding hands across the table? Do you think I'm stupid? Victor looked as though he wanted to sink into the floor. Sophia, he muttered under his breath, what's going on here? Ethan turned to him, his voice sharp. Did she tell you she's married? That she has 2 kids at home who think their mom is at work right now? Or did she conveniently leave that part out? Victor's face flushed, and he glared at Sophia. You said you were separated. Sophia's eyes darted between the 2 men, her composure completely shattered. I didn't think it mattered, she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan shook his head, disgusted. Unbelievable, he muttered. You've lied to everyone, me, him, our kids. How many other lies are there, Sophia? The silence at the table was suffocating. Victor finally stood, grabbing his coat. I'm not dealing with this, he said, his voice terse. You 2 can figure it out. Without another glance, he walked out, leaving Sophia and Ethan alone. Sophia's tears were streaming freely now, but Ethan felt no sympathy. He stood, his movements slow and deliberate. You've humiliated me for the last time, he said, his voice cold. I hope it was worth it. Ethan, wait, Sophia pleaded, her voice breaking. We can fix this. Please don't do this. Ethan turned to her, his expression hard. Fix it? There's nothing left to fix, Sophia. You broke it. Without another word, he walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sophia sitting alone at the table, her perfect world crumbling around her. As Ethan got into his car, a strange sense of calm washed over him. The confrontation had been painful, but it had also been cathartic. He wasn't going to let Sophia's betrayal define him. From this moment on, Ethan was reclaiming his life, and she was going to face the consequences. The drive home from the restaurant was a blur for Ethan. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. His confrontation with Sophia and Victor replayed in his mind, each detail sharpening his resolve. The anger and betrayal he felt were no longer paralyzing. They were fuel. If Sophia thought she could continue living her double life unscathed, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. Once home, Ethan poured himself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, his thoughts cold and methodical. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about accountability. Sophia had humiliated him, betrayed their vows, and torn their family apart. She didn't get to walk away unscathed. Ethan began by documenting everything. He retrieved the photos he'd taken at the restaurant and organized them alongside screenshots from the GPS tracker app showing her stops at suspicious locations. He even wrote a timeline of her behavior, noting the gradual changes in her routine and demeanor that had led to his discovery. With every piece of evidence, Ethan felt more prepared for the battle ahead. The next day, he contacted a highly recommended divorce attorney. During their consultation, Ethan laid out everything: the emotional abuse, the affair, and the evidence he'd gathered. The attorney listened intently, nodding as Ethan explained his goals. He didn't just want a divorce. He wanted a fair custody agreement, and to ensure Sophia's lies didn't go unnoticed. Within a week, the divorce papers were drafted and served to Sophia. The moment she received them, her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. At first, she tried to play the victim, calling Ethan in tears and begging him to reconsider. But when that didn't work, her tone shifted to anger and blame. "You're ruining everything," she screamed during one call. "Do you even care about our family?" Ethan didn't respond. He refused to let her manipulate him anymore. Sophia's struggles only worsened as the truth of her affair became public. Ethan made sure their mutual friends and her family knew what had happened, not out of malice, but to ensure she couldn't twist the narrative. He shared the photos and timeline with a select few, enough to make it clear that he wasn't the villain in this story. Victor, who had initially seemed so confident and untouchable, didn't stick around. When he learned about the depth of Sophia's lies, her marriage, her children, and the extent of her deceit, he walked away without hesitation. "I don't need this kind of drama," he reportedly told a mutual acquaintance before cutting all ties with Sophia. Sophia's life began unraveling. Juggling her career, shared custody of the children, and the fallout from her exposed affair proved too much. She no longer had the polished, untouchable image she'd carefully curated. The cracks in her facade were visible to everyone, and for the first time, Sophia was forced to face the consequences of her actions. Ethan watched it all unfold from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with a sense of closure. Sophia's struggles weren't his responsibility anymore. He had his own life to rebuild. The first few weeks after the divorce were a whirlwind of emotions for Ethan. Moving into a modest apartment across town felt like starting over, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. The weight of Sophia's constant belittling and manipulation was gone, and in its place was a quiet determination to rebuild his life. Ethan started by reaching out to old colleagues and professional contacts. It wasn't easy stepping back into the workforce after years away, but his skills and reputation hadn't been forgotten. Within a few weeks, he landed a job at a tech company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a fresh start, a stepping stone toward independence. As he settled into his new routine, Ethan found himself rediscovering passions he'd long ignored. He'd always been interested in online business, so he began working on a side project in the evenings, a website offering digital tools for freelancers. What started as a hobby quickly gained traction, and within a year, the site was generating enough income for Ethan to consider leaving his day job. But Ethan's transformation wasn't just about work. His relationship with his children became his top priority. On weekends, he planned outings, helped them with school projects, and made their time together memorable. Seeing their smiles and hearing their laughter reminded him of what truly mattered. Sophia, meanwhile, was struggling to adjust to her new reality. Balancing her career with the demands of shared custody was more challenging than she'd anticipated. The support she'd relied on from Ethan was gone, and her life, once so carefully controlled, felt chaotic. Even her friends began to distance themselves, wary of the drama surrounding her. Ethan didn't revel in her struggles. Instead, he focused on his own growth. He'd learned a hard lesson about trust, sacrifice, and self-worth, and he was determined not to let bitterness define him. With each passing day, he felt more like the person he used to be, confident, driven, and whole. One evening, as Ethan worked on his website, he glanced at a photo on his desk. It was a picture of him and the kids at the park, their faces lit with joy. He smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Sophia's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been a turning point. It forced him to confront the cracks in his life and rebuild something stronger. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his heart light. Life had thrown him a curveball, but he'd hit it out of the park. And for that, he was grateful. Betrayal can feel like the end of the world, especially when it comes from someone you trusted with your heart and your life. But as Ethan's story shows, it doesn't have to define you. It's not the betrayal that shapes who you are, it's how you rise from it. Ethan could have let Sophia's cruelty and infidelity shatter him completely. Instead, he used it as a wake-up call to reclaim his life. He rediscovered his passions, built a successful career, and created a better future for himself and his kids. He didn't let bitterness consume him. He turned his pain into purpose. Life after betrayal isn't easy, but it's possible to find peace, happiness, and even strength in the aftermath. Ethan learned that self-worth doesn't come from someone else's approval. It comes from within. And when he finally let go of the toxic relationship holding him back, he realized just how much he was capable of achieving on his own. What about you? Have you ever faced a betrayal that forced you to rethink your life? How did you rise from it? Share your experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. Your strength and resilience might just inspire someone else who's struggling right now. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life tales of resilience, drama, and lessons learned, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's always more to uncover, and every story is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's a way forward. Thank you for watching, and remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else. It's yours to define. See you next time.